It was only a matter of lucidly recognizing what had to be recognized, of dispelling extraneous shadows and doing what needed to be done. There's our philosophy. It's kind of like Neil deGrasse Tyson's take on the coronavirus. He's like, if we do what science tells us to do, we'll be okay. And I think our main character here is a bit like that. When I stop. Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Not Boring Book Club, the show where I read you a book so you don't have to. We're covering The Plague, aka La Peste, if you're French and sexy. The Plague was written by Albert Camus. He wrote The Stranger, 1940s, 1950s era philosophical writer who wrote a lot of like absurdist stories. The Stranger is about a guy who kills somebody on a beach and doesn't even know why he does it. And so they're just these weird stories, and eventually he tackled what else but pestilences, disease, specifically the bubonic plague, and the phenomenon of what happens when a disease spreads throughout a small town. What better time than now than to dive into some deep psychology about what happens when we are all forced to start quarantining. Anyway, let's dive into it. The unusual events described in this chronicle occurred in 1940 at Oran. For its ordinariness is what strikes one about the town of Oran. So Oran is like most places in America that you drive through. You know, there's a Sheetz, some sort of soup plantation, and a lot of candy and liquor. And, you know, people get along with their days, and they're not very happy. But there's not tremendous sorrow either. Perhaps the easiest way of making a town's acquaintance is to ascertain how the people in it work, how they love, and how they die. In Oran, all three are done with much the same feverish yet casual air. That's a good way to describe sex. Feverish yet casual. The truth is that everyone is bored and devotes himself to cultivating habits. Citizens work hard, but solely for the object of getting rich. Sound familiar? So basically, to give you a little bit of Camus' philosophy, he's been called a hopeful pessimist. In other words, most of life is distraction, abstraction, lying. It's bullshit, essentially. And there's a lot of pain and suffering, and there's really no meaning to it all because he was an atheist. So basically, like the existentialist, he believed we create our own meaning, and that's what we're put on this earth to do. And that's where the hopeful side of it comes. We as human beings are in charge of how we react to these situations, and our heroism is shown in those moments. Apparently Camus was really smart, really successful, and also just not that weird. Most smart people are really weird. Actually, we're going to be introduced now to the main character of this book, Dr. Rieux, who's based on Camus. It's Camus writing a heroic version of himself. And I kind of like it when he describes himself, because if you're basing a character on yourself, you get to be Kanye West levels of narcissism.
For me to say I wasn't a genius, I would just be lying to you and to myself.
Looks about 35, moderate height, broad shoulders, almost rectangular face, dark steady eyes but prominent jaws, a biggish, well-modeled nose, black hair cropped very close, a curving mouth with thick, usually tight-set lips. With his tan skin, the dark but becoming suits he always wears, he reminds one of a Sicilian peasant. That's his way of describing himself. That's so great. Dr. Rieux begins to find rats. And that's where this book starts to heat up. A dead rat on his property. For context, he's got a sick wife that he's sent off. Back in the day, they had this thing called sanatoriums. Like Darwin used to go to them. They didn't really know what to do with you for mental health, so they just take you to a big white room and throw cold water on you and make you eat Kellogg's cereal and stuff. They were just throwing a lot at the wall. So Rieux in this book sends his wife to something like that to get better. But she's probably not going to get better. But luckily, she gets out of town before these rats start dying. So then the concierge gets these lumps. I was fascinated by bubonic plague growing up. I was fascinated by really gross stuff like medieval torture, bubonic plague. You know, little boys are interested in horrible shit like that. But the bubonic plague, something about these lumps appearing on you and they're full of goo. You just turn into a lumpy creature. Something extra horrifying about that. So, you know, despite the coronavirus being what it is, it could be worse. The first time the word plague is mentioned, he makes a big deal out of that. That's like a switch takes place. And yet the first time there's no emotional reaction. Somebody will be like, you know, certainly it could be plague, but it's sort of nonchalant. And that reminds me of the first time one of my friends used pandemic with the coronavirus. It was very nonchalant. Rieux is called to a suicide attempt. You can't have a Camus book without a suicide in it, because part of Camus' philosophy was a sort of Hamlet-style to be or not to be questioning of the purpose of existence. People used to be fascinated by suicide way more than they are. I don't think it's that important of a question. To be or not to be. Being, as long as you're not in excruciating pain, there's always an upside, there's always a way to make it interesting, but not for Camus. He's always got to have a character in here who's like, what should I go on? What is the point? Shall I bring life into the world just to suffer? What is this world? Even though Camus like wearing suits, he's got like 3 wives. You know, his life is sick, but he's like, should I kill myself? Come on, Camus. That was just a way to sell books. People romanticize suicide, and actually it's a big problem. So we'll call out Camus there a little bit. Meanwhile, victims of this plague are starting to get black patches.
The black spot.
I've heard with coronavirus, the one person I know who got it, she said it was like breathing icy hot into her lungs, which sucks. I'm taking this opportunity to be humbled by biological natural disasters. The ganglia had become still larger and felt like lumps of solid fibrous matter embedded in the flesh. Ganglia. Recognizing that lumps of fibrous material could just start shooting out of your neck while your family and friends are all around you makes you appreciate the fact that it's not happening now. But it did happen. It did. What's interesting about this story is it centers around them shutting down this small town in the Mediterranean so that the disease does not spread. Now that wouldn't even be a potential. Now, if a disease breaks out, it's going worldwide, baby. Skip ahead here a little bit. Talking about old plagues now. Athens apparently deserted even by the birds. The building of the Great Wall in Provence to fend off furious plague wind. Carnival of masked doctors at the Black Death. Think about that. That's not just a fashion statement for sex parties, okay? That nose mask is so you can breathe without getting plague winds. Why did that Black Death weird mask become a sex party thing? Oh Lord. Okay, 10%. Think clearly, be aware, and do what has to be done. Thing is to do your job as it should be done. You know, Camus is very much that way. You know, we're only entitled to our toil. He wrote this story called The Myth of Sisyphus, where Sisyphus is a Greek character who's cursed to push a boulder up a hill all day long. And then it rolls back down, and he has to do it again. And this is the curse of modern man. You know, we go to work every day, and then it rolls back down. We gotta get more money. Rolls back down, gotta get more money. And Camus' take in that story was, the great thing about human beings is that we can still be happy in our toil. It's pretty dark. Maybe life was worse in 1947. Probably right. I think we've gotten a little better, so maybe this doesn't feel as relevant. The overall lesson still stands. When we're in a bad situation, we're in control of how we react to it. And I hope we can all make the most of this. They drifted through life rather than lived, the prey of aimless days and sterile memories. Thus, too, they came to know the incorrigible sorrow of all prisoners and exiles, which is to live in company with a memory that serves no purpose. That's a hardcore sentence. I like sentences. That's a good sentence. Yeah, I'm very lucky to, in this time, not be falling victim to the ennui. I think a lot of people are really not sure what to do. They think they're bored. I think they have too many choices. You gotta narrow down the choices and sort of decide where you want to put your efforts. Now that life isn't giving you distractions all the time. Oh, we're doing a bowling night. Oh, the movie came out. Oh, we're going to this. Yeah, just a lot of personal reflection and analysis goes on whenever anything in life changes. My mom calls these like pattern interrupts. There's something unique about an infection that forces us. In order to overcome, you have to slow down. And if there's one thing in the modern era we could use, I think it's slowing down. So for all the people who have the economic ability to do this, embrace this time of slowness and humility. How should they have given a thought to anything like plague, which rules out any future, cancels journeys, silences the exchange of views? They fancied themselves free, and no one will ever be free so long as there are pestilences. So let's leave on that note. Thank you all for watching. Please subscribe and follow me at DevinPG on Instagram if you want to see these readings live, interact, hang out, all that good stuff.